So good to see you. I'm coming to you today from Singapore, and Connie is joining us from Edmonton.
Edmonton, you got it.
Nice. Awesome. I'm going to turn it over to Nat to do land acknowledgement, and we'll be right back.
Thanks, V. Hi, everyone. My name is Nat. I use she, her pronouns. As I'm sure you're familiar with by this point, I am joining in today from Toronto, Treaty 13 territory here on the land of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Huron-Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. I think that today's topic is a perfect time to think about the Indigenous communities in our lives. A lot of the energy from where I live comes from Indigenous lands, comes from Indigenous waters, and from resources that are traditionally those of Indigenous people. And the settlers on the land have not done a great job of ensuring that we preserve and protect them. So today I'm excited to learn about Connie and all of the ways that she is changing how we use power and energy in the world. Back to you, V.
Thanks so much, Nat. And as I mentioned, coming to you today from Singapore on my way to Australia and New Zealand. MJ will be joining me down there too, and we'll be doing retreats and lots of gatherings. And so I see some of the folks that we're going to see in person. Hello, really excited. And we'll put some links in the chat towards the end of the call for you to tag your friends on social to come to some of those events that are open to the public. So, all right. Hello, Connie.
Hello, Vicky. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great. So just for everyone, we got on the call a little bit early to chat, and Connie is just back from her first vacation since 2009. Okay, like this is not the future. Yeah, this is like past leadership. Goodbye. See ya. And just got back from 2 weeks. So how are you?
I'm tanned and happy.
Nice. That's great. Well, welcome back.
Thank you. Good to see you.
It's really good to see you too. So before we started the call, you also, we're just going to do this and park it as like, this is past Connie, future Connie is going to be different. Mm-hmm. But 6.5 years, no days off.
6.5 years, no days off. It was part of my, probably could use some rethinking on this, but part of my goal philosophy was I had to take an action towards my goal every day. And so that's what I did, is I worked every single day for 6.5 years. Sadly, even including the day my daughter was born, our third child. My wife carried our third child, by the way, so think about me in a side chair, not on the hospital bed. But you know what, we've had a lot of growth internally in the last year in particular, and really making sure we're starting to live the values we preach, and making sure everyone in our team takes their holidays and make sure that they put their families first and not job, and knowing that that doesn't jeopardize their job. So it's been really good.
Yeah, I can like completely relate to all these. And I think there are lots of folks on the call too. I mean, it just starts, you have to be modeling the behavior. And so we're entering the new planet now. All right. So let's go back to the beginning. How did you get into, first of all, hi, who are you? Why are you here?
Who am I?
And how did you get into this whole thing? Yeah.
Existential crisis. No. So actually it was kind of twofold. I have often talked, when I've been asked this question about where it all started, I often talk about this day where I was taking my twin boys for a walk when they were about 3 months old, and hearing a diesel generator going off and thinking, if you wake these babies, I'm going to lose my mind, which is still true, totally true. But it was actually, the more I think about it, that wasn't actually the catalyst that made me start the business. That gave me the idea about how to rethink energy. But what actually gave me what was actually the catalyst for starting the business was when I learned about energy poverty. And it really, in North America in particular, I think, or at least that's my experience for the most part, we have a tendency to not realize how big a problem it is globally. And there's 3 numbers that I always really like to share with people. 1 billion people still go with candlelight only. They don't have any access to energy. So that's like 1 in 8. 2.6 billion don't have enough to cook in any other way than to burn something. Huge environmental problem and massive problem for lung issues. And more than half the world's population lives in what's called domestic energy poverty. where they only have power certain hours a day, or only low voltage power, or rampant blackouts. And when I learned about this stuff and I realized how big an impact it had, that's what really became the catalyst. And the other part that goes with it was there have been a number of studies that have shown that access to energy is perfectly correlated to economic growth. So you literally can't end poverty unless you end energy poverty. And that for me was when I said, I've got to do it. I've just got to do it. Yeah, so that's how it started.
And so background, like how did you even start to think about tackling this small little challenge that you saw in the
small
world?
little challenge. Yeah, no problem, right? Little ones. You know what? My background actually had been in IT for 20 plus years, but at this point, when I was off on mat leave with my boys. But surprisingly, computer and electrical engineering are actually the same department because there is quite a lot of overlap. And every server room in the world has an uninterrupted power supply, which is a type of battery. So I think that's where my brain kind of automatically jumped was, well, if we can use battery in those types of settings, why couldn't we use it in a setting like remote power and create better access? And a lot of it came back to this idea that batteries needed technicians or needed support to be used. So they weren't being used in place of things like diesel generators. And that's where my brain really started to get going and how we kind of came up with the initial technology.
Okay, so say more. How did you get started around that? Like, I mean, the original technology. Tell us what you do.
Sure. Okay, so basically we created and patented a technology that allows us to take batteries and combine them like Lego bricks. I mean, that's the easiest technology or description I can give, is that without an electrician or engineer or any kind of training, you can take these things and assemble them together to make small, medium, large, super large power systems. And the idea here was around basically to create a way to end energy poverty. There were really three things that kind of consistently kept coming up. One was it had to truly be, whatever we did had to be plug and play, which is why we created this Lego type idea, because if you're a single mom in sub-Saharan Africa in a rural village, you don't live next door to an electrician. So it had to truly be plug and play. It had to be scalable, because if you start with something and then have to start from scratch every time you want to grow, we'll never get anywhere. And three, it had to be portable, because that's our lives. And that really kind of formed the foundation for how we built our technology, and kind of everything started to flow from there. And I can certainly, if you want, get into a little more of the technical, how it's different from other types of systems. Would you like me to do a bit more of that?
Yeah, sure. Go.
Sure.
Well, before you go technical, like give me an example of where it's being used and how it's being used, and I'll go to the technical. Just make it like tangible.
Sure. So one example right now, we're working on a project, hopefully soon to be confirmed, with an Indigenous group in Canada, where they quite frankly have very unreliable power. So at any given time, they're coastal, power is wiped out, they're down to using diesel generators, or they don't have power at all. We have similar projects, for example, up as far as a blue lift we've been talking with, where, when the power is out in winter, people die. So having a system that's reliable and doesn't need you to have a technician on site becomes unbelievably crucial. But it also works in really everyday industrial and business type applications. So one of our projects we're working with right now is a mine in northern Saskatchewan. And for them to get onto site is a huge process, right? So when they have a situation, if for example, a battery pack needs to be serviced, they don't need us to come. They just simply have a technician take out the pack, put in a spare, and the next truck going into Saskatoon or whatever sends that pack to us. So that's really quite unique in the way it works. So those are the first couple of examples I can think of, but it also goes to things like remote camps, like construction sites that could be anywhere. Or one of the ones that I really hope we get a chance to work with would be things like refugee camps. So those are really big type of projects where we can, I think, do a lot of good.
Okay, so we've got a couple questions in the chat around, like, does it replace generators? How does this technology, how is it differentiated from other offerings? So can you go a little bit technical? And
Sure.
Then my face for when I start to go, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Absolutely. So one of the biggest things is the modularity. So first question was, can it replace diesel generators? Absolutely. That's its first primary goal. And one of the things we did with that is we made it what we call input agnostic. So the idea is it can be charged with anything as small as a hand crank up to a hydro dam. So it can be grid, it can be anything, so that we can create as many opportunities as possible. So, because a lot of people, the question that comes with a diesel generator question is, well, diesel generator generates energy by burning gasoline. Batteries are storage, right? So by themselves, they do not generate. So that's where we made it input agnostic, because we don't know what's going to be the best generation source for whatever customer we're trying to work with. So we wanted it to be as flexible as possible. In terms of the technology and how it's different right now, one of the probably best examples I can give is the system is entirely modular, right down to the individual components inside. And normally what happens with a battery pack, and everybody has seen say a D battery or a C battery that you buy at the store, like a Duracell. Well, inside a big lithium pack of batteries is often something like 250 of these cells. And they're spot welded together in series or parallel to create a power block. So it might be something like 48 volts, 100 amp hours, or it could be 12 volts, 100 amp hours like you have in your car. So when they're combined though, what happens is once it's been spot welded, it has actually damaged the integrity of the cell. So you can never replace a cell in that setting. So that's what the industry does. Now we don't do that. We actually connect every cell individually and monitor them individually. So the idea is what happens now, if, for example, one cell should start to age faster than the rest, well, we unscrew it and put in a spare. Now, in the industry standard, one cell goes, all 250 of those cells in that pack are gone. It's a massive environmental impact, but we don't do that. We allow it so that we can actually remove and replace a single cell. In the battery industry, there is no servicing of packs. They simply replace and things go to second life if it can be used at all. So that's one of the really big components. The other piece to it, of course, gets into that whole modularity of being able to use it in as many settings as possible. And one of the, I think, probably best examples is we actually won an energy contest, alternative energy contest, with the Canadian Department of Defense. And as it turns out, these guys actually turn out to be a great example because our special forces do a lot of the natural disaster support globally. So if there's been a tsunami, there's been an earthquake, etc., these guys are setting up camps, guys and gals, all over the world. And so we don't know what the climate's going to be. We don't know what their energy demands are going to be, but they have to be able to set it up right away, and they have to do it without us. So that became really good example for us, a good model to show how flexible the system could be. So in this case, the system comes in, and it happens to be in a sea can, but it could be in any size of container or block or in a building. But once it's there, then they can connect whatever type of generation they need without an electrician. So it's basically literally you plug in a cord. So we provide solar with it, but you can do your own solar. You can take packs off the rack. So it's powering their whole camp. And an individual dismounted soldier can come in, take a pack off the rack, go out into the field and plug in medical equipment to that pack to service an injured person at a site of a disaster. So that's one of the biggest areas where it really stands out, is that ability to take it apart and put it back together without needing training or technicians. So that's one of our biggest differentiators. And then we get into a couple of other things around, and I really think this fits with the rethinking energy portion, Vicki, and it's a great topic, by the way. But this idea that we've kind of approached embedded generation. And for those who don't know, when we talk about embedded generation, we're usually talking about, say, a customer, whether it's government or commercial, house, doesn't matter, who is putting out their own generation. So something like solar or wind. And that becomes, that little site is called embedded generation because it's connected to the grid and it's generating its own power as well. So what happens is, in the past, the thinking has always been, you put up solar on your house and you're going to feed that energy into the grid. And when you need energy, you pull it back from the grid. But that actually has some problems to it. For example, and Californians are very aware of this, Right, MJ? She's nodding in the background. I can see it. If the power goes out, even though you're generating, you actually have no power, because what happens is you actually have to shut down the solar generation, because the electrician working on the grid could actually get injured if you're still generating power. So that has been kind of the standard thinking, is that you generate and you feed back to the grid. But we don't do that. Times have changed, and we actually think there's a much better argument for generating and storing on site, and not just because it's batteries, but part of it comes to this idea, and I'm getting a little technical here, so stop me if I go too far. But one of the things that happens in our energy grid is around switching between DC current and AC current, so direct current and alternating current. And tiny bit of history for you here. But when they first built the grid, they had this question: do we build it in AC or do we build it in DC? And Edison said DC. But the problem was, at the time, we couldn't push a DC current a long distance. So those people promoting AC, like Tesla, actually won that argument, and they created the grid in AC power. But here's the rub. Unfortunately, most things want to run on DC power, right? So when you have your laptop, your phone, everything, you know, the little block that's on it, that little black box, or if it's Apple White, that's a converter. It turns AC power back to DC power. And every time we generate, whether it's solar, it's wind, even, you know, some of the less clean energy sources, it naturally creates DC power. So our system, the way it works today, is we generate DC power, and then we flip it to AC power. And when we do, we lose typically 8 to 10% of the energy in flipping it. Then we push it out onto the grid, and we lose 2 to 4% as it goes out onto the grid. Then you pull it back from the grid and lose 2 to 4%. And then you plug in something that needs DC power, like an electric vehicle, and it flips it back to DC power, and you lose another 8 to 10%. Well, if you do your math, you're at 25 to 30% loss just on that. Now,
Wow.
one of the studies I read, and this is just, to me, this number blows my mind. I wish I could remember the group. It was one of the California environmental agencies, put out a study, and they commented that a 3% efficiency gain across the US grid, 3%, was the equivalent of taking 19 million cars off the road. This is 30. So just think about that in terms of scope, when we can save that much energy. So that's one of the things that battery systems can allow us to do. And that's not even just us. We have a very different approach, and our technology allows us to do this. But honestly, it's about rethinking, right? Why do we push it back onto the grid? We're creating DC energy with our solar. We're going to store it in a battery that's DC, and then we're going to output it to your car that's DC. Well, you just save 30% of your energy. That's massive. That's massive. Did I go too tech?
No, I think this is great. And there's like some comments in the chat, and thanks everyone for adding them. I mean, like, this is, again, like one of these, if you sort of look underneath at the surface of how we've designed things in the world, how messed up things are, like, it's so inefficient, not unlike with capital, right? We just like flush all this money to try and get like this max return, but it's inefficient. So you have rethought this. And I think there's like some questions around how long does charge last, regenerating these things, like how do you recharge them? You talk about having an extra around. Okay, well, what if you don't have an extra? What's your vision for how this occurs?
So the vision is big, just like my personality. It goes on and on. So actually, one of the things that we really want to see happen in the long term is we want every single person, even if you're not a homeowner, every single person to be able to be a clean energy generator. And that's one of the reasons why you know how I mentioned a hand crank? Well, that idea was that every single person could generate energy by cranking or using a bicycle or even a pulley over a tree branch to generate energy. And when you generate it and store it in the battery and then put it back into a bigger system, you just became effectively your own little utility. You can create your own economic opportunities and gains by creating clean energy. So to me, it's that energy poverty, but it's also poverty because it's creating jobs for people in ways that currently don't exist. So to me, that's kind of where it gets really big. It's creating a system where and try and imagine almost like a vending machine of batteries, but where you could effectively take out an empty battery, charge it with your bicycle, and put it back and make $5. And for some families, that is being in poverty and starving or not. And at the same time, you as an individual are contributing to solving a huge global problem, which is climate change, right? So this is, to me, that's the extent. It goes all the way out.
Great. I'm just totally laughing at Joanne DeVisers. That might get you on your Peloton. Me too. I'd feel a lot better about doing that every day if I was like, yeah, exactly. Okay, so I'm gonna let's move a little bit away from this. Like one of the things that you have talked about is just this is a very big idea. And it's like a huge thing to go, the way that we organize energy in the world doesn't make sense. And I want to fix that is like, what? And I love it so much. This is the kinds of things that get selected in this community. It's amazing. But tell us a little bit about the journey, the naysayers, a little bit of the struggle along the way and how you navigated that. Because like your story is wild, just wild.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of naysayers. And I mean, I'm sure given this group in particular, we're all aware that there's plenty of bias. Even when people are well-intending, unintentional bias still exists. And I think a lot of people looked at me and thought, yeah, you're going to manufacture batteries. Sure. Show me when it's done. Show me when it's real. So there was a high level of skepticism from the beginning. And I had kind of thought we would have some success with brands, at least some limited success with brands and things like that, but we didn't. We had nothing. We couldn't get loans. We couldn't get support, nothing from anybody. And we had some outright blatant sexism. I'm going to leave out the who because individuals don't represent a whole organization, but the way many of our organizations, particularly in things like government and funding agencies work, is that one person can be a block to a path towards help. So if you have one contact, which we did in this case, and that contact doesn't support you and is potentially sexist, you have no path forward. So the example, I'm going to leave out names and stuff, protect the innocent, as they say, but we had somebody who wouldn't have anything to do with us. And someone else at Alberta Innovates here had talked to this person, different organization entirely, said, I think you should go back and talk to these guys. I think they have something there. And so he came back, and as it happened, I had a new salesperson that I had just hired, awesome guy named Yaron. And I had him sitting in on this meeting because I wanted him to become familiar with all the things happening in the company. And this guy came back and he leaned over to my sales guy and patted him on the knee and said, well, now that you've got someone technical on board. Now, I've been in tech for 20 years, and this is what he said to my sales guy. And we still could not get support through him. And even when I asked to, like, can we get a different rep? The response was, no, that's the clean tech person for that region, full stop. That was our access to the main types of funding that often come for things like clean tech in Canada, and we were blocked. So we had, for us, I mean, the money was absolutely not present. And let me tell you, starting a battery company, manufacturing batteries is about as expensive an option as a startup as you could possibly choose. I'm probably, I'll say, slightly grateful that I wasn't aware of just how expensive it was going to be, because I probably would never have taken this on. But the way I overcame it was a number of things. One was just determination bordering on stubbornness. I couldn't give up because there was no other option for me. Often you see, in a tech startup, you see these Silicon Valley folks, and it's often, pardon me, but that straight white guy, and maybe they have a failed first venture, but they get a second shot. Women don't get a second shot. Typically a woman in startup, if there's a failure, that's it. It's the big black mark. I put everything on the line, my house, everything we'd saved, everything, like our kids' educations, everything was on the line. So there was no turning around. There is no failure. I had to find a way forward. So I was absolutely determined that I could only go ahead. There was no stopping. I had a small group of truly amazing supporters who didn't know the first thing about technology and they weren't supportive in how you run a business. They just believed in me. And they said, Connie, I know you can do it. I got your back. You're going to do it. And sometimes just that hearing somebody else say, I believe in you was everything. And honestly, I mean, Coralus was one of the biggest things for us. I mean, there came a time, and I know we're going to talk a little probably more about this later, but, just before COVID hit, we had worked months and months on getting this contract with the city of Edmonton for this really big project, $10.5 million to do the big exposition center here. We had just signed the MOU for the project. 1 month later, COVID hit. And everything was put on indefinite hold. And it wasn't the city of Edmonton's fault. That was outside their control. They had to deal with a pandemic. But I had no idea how we're going to continue forward. If we hadn't actually gotten the venture funding and that interest-free loan, I don't know how we would have managed, because I didn't have a way to pay my staff. I mean, I hadn't been paying myself. So that was already, luckily my wife was able to help support our home income. But I was looking at laying off my staff. I was looking at losing everything. So honestly, I just don't know how we would have gotten through without you guys. I'm going to get all of them, so I'm going to stop.
Thanks, Connie. We feel the same. Like it's just such a gift to be able to support people who have vision like you. So me too. It's like, okay. So let's hop into how it's going, because things have changed. Like, I don't know. I feel like we all get hazed through are you really in? Are you sure you're really going to, make this happen? And so you powered through.
We powered through, and one of the biggest things was actually we started to get technology awards, and they weren't cash, but it was recognition. And one of the key ones really came summer of 2018. We had entered this US Department of Defense Innovation Contest. And by the way, they are the world's single largest energy user. So what they do to the environment with their diesel generators is massive. So we entered this, but guess what? It didn't really ask about the founders or anything. So that it didn't have that bias around gender or anything. It just, here's a technology. And they said, wow, that's amazing. You win. And we won this technology award. And suddenly all these other people went, whoa, the US Department of Defense only buys the best of the best. And if they think this is something, maybe there's something there. And, we still didn't have money. Every 2 weeks, I was turning over the cushions, looking for enough to keep everything afloat and keep my staff paid. But all of a sudden we started to get people look, and then it started to build momentum. And I knew that was an important one. It was just like this, we started to turn this corner. It was a long bend, but I could see it was changing. And it has just started to speed up and speed up and speed up. And, because people ask that question, like, how do you know you've got it at this point? And I can tell you partly, we cannot answer the calls and the emails fast enough for people who are going, how do I get it? I want to be a part of it. How can I buy it? When can I get it? That's part of it. Part of it is the buy-in that we're getting from the larger community now. I mean, like, honestly, without you guys, we wouldn't still be here. But now all of a sudden, oh, lo and behold, other folks like investors are going, maybe I'm interested. And what's amazing for me is part of why I, in the first place, didn't really want to have investors was I was afraid they would take away from our social enterprise purpose, right? That as soon as money came involved, and batteries is big dollars, right? Like that project I mentioned, one project, $10.5 million project. That's one, right? And it's not even a really big project. Well, I was afraid these guys would come in, guys and gals, and say, okay, that's great. Show me the bottom dollar. And all of a sudden the projects for places like a glue lick that have a smaller margin become a lower priority. And I didn't want that to happen. And, in the early days, I didn't have the choice. They weren't looking at us anyway, but we got through with the support of folks like yourselves. And now all of a sudden they're coming back and we're going, you know what, let us think about it, because we're going to ask that you meet our ethic requirements, right? So we talk a lot about ethical energy. Well, we want all of our clients to be ethical as well. In fact, one of the processes we're putting in now is how we screen our clients, because we're saying it's not enough to just come and buy. I don't care if you have money. that's not the driving factor. If what you are doing is just greenwashing, as they call it, then we're not interested. There are better projects that are more worth our time. And that's where we want to spend our energy. So that was, it's just been such a shift, right? And our staff were up to 18 full-time, and I expect by around June, that'll be closer to 30. And we're expecting, as we're starting to actually be able to plan out the 3 years, we're expecting to hit about 60 within the next 3 years. And the question is starting to be, we're starting to get questions like, hey, would you consider opening a facility in our region? Because we manufacture here in Edmonton, which is something that nobody does, right? There are almost no companies that actually manufacture products in North America, battery products. So we're really quite uncommon in that regard. So now we're getting, people in Eastern Canada or Mexico or other parts of the world who are saying, would you consider coming and manufacturing where we are? Which really fits with our kind of bigger philosophy. One of the things that, again, is a little bit of our rethinking is the carbon footprint that's associated with clean energy systems. Often a lot of it comes from the logistics of carrying the product components all over the world. So lithium products, by the way, typically you see something like it's mined in South America and they don't produce any cells. It is 100% shipped offshore to places, mostly Asia, predominantly China, pass through multiple companies. Then those cells are then sold to companies in North America or other Asian companies to make into packs. And then they're sold to a customer who might be in Germany. And the lithium just goes all around. So for us, one of our goals is to always be able to service our clients by road or rail, which means we have to set up manufacturing facilities where they are, which creates that circular economy of creating more jobs and opportunities in the places where we do business.
And when you're making the batteries, can you just quickly, because this was a thing that I was really surprised about, it's the ethical sourcing of materials isn't actually an issue, right?
Well, for us, it is something that we are taking out of the equation, but it has been, for other companies, the ethical path is, well, it's not ethical at all.
Right. Yeah. But how do you take that out of the equation then? Explain that.
Well, it's a number of things. So part of it is we don't take it as a one and done, I guess. So we don't say, okay, we're going to look at our supply chain and then we're done. We're always looking at our supply chain. We're always looking at who are we buying from? What are their ethical practices in terms of human rights? Where are they getting their components? What is the footprint of those components? Are they a diverse supplier? How can we support other diverse suppliers? And, again, those things like greenwashing, are they just there trying to look good or do they mean what they say? So it's always an ongoing process of evaluating who our suppliers are, what the process is of getting it to us. Right now, we almost are at a place where we can be 100% North American made, really close. I don't get to talk about the who and what's in the background, but there's two big plays that are happening right now that could see us be 100% components all from North America, which would drop the carbon footprint on our product to by far the lowest carbon footprint of any battery technology in the world. I'm positive.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, we've had lots of questions in the chat. If people want to come off mute and just put your hand up, we can get you in a line to start asking some of the questions. But I wanted to, you talked a little bit about being able to not just manufacture, but have your manufacturing locally so things aren't being shipped all over the world, which is the distribution is the real big problem.
Yep.
And is that happening anywhere yet, or are you close to that?
Well, we hope so. So we've had, so obviously we're in Edmonton right now, and we're trying to make sure all of our components are here. One of the things that we're actually doing is, and this is just kind of a me thing, but our biggest problem has been getting the actual cells that we use inside of a battery system. So just to kind of give a little bit of vocabulary, when I talk about battery systems, cells are little individual components. A battery pack would be multiple cells, put together in a series in parallel to create a bigger system or pack. And then those packs are put together to create really big systems that go out in containers and things like that. So the cells have been the individual piece that has been the most difficult to get because There's only a handful of people who make cells in North America, and those who do, like Tesla, use their own. So we can't buy them. So my approach was, screw it, we'll do it ourselves. So if you can't beat them, join them, so to speak. So we said, you know what, if we can't get an ethical solution, if we cannot buy an ethical product that meets our requirements in terms of carbon footprint, then we're going to look at, well, let's do it ourselves. And we are very, very seriously going down this path. And I think we're, not officially there yet, but we're working hard to make this happen in the next couple of years. So we will not only provide batteries, but we will actually manufacture the cells themselves. And then we'll have that greater kind of vertical supply chain where we have better control and again, able to limit the carbon footprint and any ethical issues of movement of the product, that kind of thing.
Thanks, Connie. So Katrina has asked, how are the batteries recycled at the end of their life?
Great question. So that's actually one of the things we're working on right now. So our cells, by the way, can be recycled the way other lithium-based cells can be. And lithium ion cells, the type we use, LFP, can be completely recycled, by the way. The biggest problem has been it's not cost effective yet. So this is why this industry hasn't really boomed yet. With lead acid batteries, there was government assistance to help promote the recycling back in the beginning. And then they had enough in the system that it became profitable. That's where lithium is right now, is that it's not quite profitable yet, but they know it will be because of all the electric vehicles that are coming on. So more and more recyclers are coming into the market. We are actually working with somebody right now. We're in some discussions about actually working with a potential anode and cathode producer. So those are the components that go into the cell. We're talking tiny, tiny now. And we're kind of approaching it as, we want you to build us the anodes and cathodes, but we also want you to be the recycler. So that basically we close the loop so that they take the lithium, turn it into the components. And when it's all said and done, it goes back to the cathode and anode producers to go into new batteries. So there's that piece to it. The other piece comes back to that serviceability. So right now, like I said, one felt cell in 250 means 250 are going to recycle. For us, we replace one cell. And one of the things to kind of give a little scope here, when you talk about the health of a battery, it's an average of the cells. So they say at 80% capacity, that's when it has to go to second life. But if, say, 4 or 5 cells are working less efficiently than the other 250 or 245 of them, then the whole pack shows as needing to be recycled. With us, we replace just those 5. So the actual potential for that pack is, we'll see what the numbers come out to be. I believe we could have easily double the length of life from our batteries than any other in the world because of this ability to replace cells. So we take longer, we keep it alive longer, and then we are working very diligently with partners to make sure we close the loop so that we create a system where there's as minimal waste as absolutely possible. There's always a challenge, which is where the ethics part come into, making sure that we don't cut corners and we don't get sloppy, and our partners don't either.
What's the, I know you can't talk about some of the deals that are sort of like underway, but give us a sense of the momentum that's building and the impact that could actually have. Because I know you've got like a huge vision for a little bit out there, if you want to share that too.
Sure. So there's a few different components to this. So one of the things we're doing right now is we've specifically tried to choose demonstration projects as we're kind of scaling now that demonstrate how you can use our system in a really wide variety of ways. So one of those projects is a mining project. And this is a really good example of how fast and effective this can be as a commercial tool. So there's a mine, northern Saskatchewan, where a power outage for them, they have a process where they have to do a clean. They have a clean room, it has to be wiped down. So even if the power outage is only 5 minutes, they have a 3-day process. So they're down and out of business for 3 days. And this is a 24/7 facility. So one power outage pays for a $9.3 million system, one outage. So wow. The payback on some of this is massive. And their response to us, because we're doing the contract right now, was, well, this was a 7 megawatt hour project. What if we just went all the way to 100 megawatt hours right off the hop? So, think scale. We just go from 9 through to how many different zeros we're adding, right? That was one. Another project we have is with a very fancy 5-star golf resort that's in Europe. And it is now much more on that embedded generation. So they're looking to lower their carbon footprint, lower their electricity bills, and have more stable energy. So that one again is, we now have grid operator approval. So now we're kind of in the paperwork final stages where we get to start building actual stuff now. So that's another big project. And again, that one we'll see there's a few pieces still at play, but it's probably going to fall in that range of about $6 to $8 million. So it's big. We have a big project this summer. So this one's already contracted. The Canadian Department of Defense, we're doing a big demonstration project in Southern Alberta. And the Department of Defense is actually inviting a member from every NATO country to come and check it out. So obviously that's massive, massive. And one of the four, again, I can leave the names out, 4 largest distributors in the world for these types of systems to NATO countries has already asked us to be a supplier for them. So now they're already pitching us to other groups. So huge on that side. The more closer to my heart projects include some of the things like we have a Eastern Canadian Indigenous community that I mentioned at the start, where they're dealing with rapid power outages and just not having enough. And Melanie mentioned in the land acknowledgement how so much of the energy we use come from resources that were on Indigenous lands and taken. And to me, being in a place to bring that back, because honestly, we as a country in Canada should be appalled at how badly the energy systems for our Indigenous communities are handled. I mean, it's horrific. So for me, those are ones that I'm most passionate about. But we have to also balance it with those ones where we know we're having a huge environmental impact and it's cash in my account, so to speak. Like they're really strong, able to pay customers like that mining company. And that mining company, by the way, we did do that ethical process of making sure that what we were providing and who we were working with matched our ethics. So it is a kind of a balance. For me, if I could, I would do all of the Indigenous projects and things like that first, but we do have to balance to make sure that we keep our cash flow healthy and can continue to grow the business. So it's a little bit of balance.
Cool. What's your big, hairy, audacious goal? I know you've got a wild one.
Yeah, we do. So actually, we just did our retreat, our leadership retreat in November. And when we were kind of battling out where we wanted to be. So first off, for those who don't know the BHAG stuff, often you say a 10-year goal. We said, well, first off, forget that. We're going to make it an 11-year goal. We made it an 11-year goal because we said by 2034, because 2035 is a big global environmental target. And we said, for the world to achieve its targets, we have to achieve ours. So we're going to say by 2034. And then we did something different again. We said, okay, well, what would it look like for our revenue by 2034? And we talked and we debated on what the numbers would look like and what was realistic if we continued on a certain path of growth. But what we came back to, and this was in the range with those realistic numbers, but we came back and we said, well, what's the world's population at 2034? What's it projected to be? And we looked it up and it said 8.7 billion. So that's our number. We're going to deliver $1 of value for every person on the planet. We're going to hit $8.7 billion in revenue by 2034. And I think we're going to beat it.
It's going on my manifesting wall. Everyone put that out there. And it's coming before that, by the way. Things are moving. Patricia, you have a question. Come on in. And then I think we'll do a couple of questions and then we're going to go to breakout rooms just for a bit of time for those who can stay a little longer and just share a little bit what has come up for you during this and then come back to center after. But Patricia, please.
Yeah, amazing, Connie. I used to manage a solar company in Jamaica, so I am very familiar with all your battery problems. But in like lithium is such a dirty mining thing, right? It's so resource heavy in terms of water, and water is a huge critical problem we have. Less in North America, but certainly in most of the world. So what's like when you're looking at these companies and sourcing, are you trying to fix that problem? You look like such a problem solver. I'm imagining you're trying to crack that nut.
Yeah, and actually, you know what? I get to kind of give a little shout out to a couple other really cool companies in Canada that are doing some work. And I know, in fact, there are others, but more familiar with these. There's actually a company called Summit Nanotech, who actually has created a technology that's supposed to, and they're doing pilots right now, reduce the amount of water used for lithium extraction massively, taking what is typically an 18-month process down to 1 month. So it also helps with supply quite a bit, but the amount of water, and I can't give you an exact number, and I don't want to be wrong there, but it is a dramatic difference in the amount of water that's required, because you're right, it's a huge problem. There's a couple other, and this is why I kind of keep an eye on this space, is looking for the technologies and the people we can partner with that will help us keep to that ethical promise. There's another company that I'm aware of that uses a type of sponge technique, I think is the best way to put it, where effectively the ions, totally not doing a good job of this, but it pulls out only the lithium. So it does so with a minimal use of water. And there's another one that I'm also aware of, and again, also going to pilot. In fact, I'm pretty sure their pilot is with Imperial Oil here in Alberta. And what they're doing is actually they're pushing an underground reserve. They're pushing it through a filter type system so that what's extracted is only the lithium. So it actually cuts the water usage by 90%. So there's some really cool things that are happening in the industry. And that's what we're constantly, that's why I say there's not a single process to the ethical part. It's always looking at how do we do it better? Because you're right, one of the biggest problems is the mining. And one step at a time, right? But great question. Yeah. Great question.
Amazing.
Thanks, Patricia. Thanks. So Connie, you've got a new CEO.
Yeah. So I'm not going to say the person's name just yet, because we're making a big official announcement in a couple of weeks here. But one of the things in trying to make sure I live that philosophy of take my holidays and put my family first, was I made the decision this summer to hire a CEO. She officially started first week of January. But the announcement will actually go out in a couple of weeks here. But I was able to find someone, and I'll be honest, by the way, I didn't ever think I would give up the CEO role simply because I didn't think I would ever find somebody who matched my values. And then it happened that I met this person, and as soon as I met her through an accelerator, I was like, we have to work together. So I asked her to be an advisor for my company. And so she agreed. And I just, right from the beginning, and this is 2 years ago now, I said, just so you're aware, when you're ready, I have a CEO job for you. And actually, I don't even know if I said CEO at the beginning. I just said, when you're ready to leave your current company, and she's very successful at scaling companies, I said, I have a job for you. And she's just, yeah, okay, Connie, sure. And I just kept persistently, and I knew she was the right person because her ethics are a total perfect match to mine. And this past 2 weeks, by the way, was a great example of that because I went on holidays to Hawaii. Yay, tan. This is my Hawaiian shirt, by the way. But I brought it back from Hawaii. It is my Hawaiian shirt. But I didn't have to worry. Like I'm coming back and I'm just getting my emails now and I'm going, that's what I would have done. That's what I would have done. Because she is just spot on. She believes in the ethics of what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we're doing it. And as an individual, she's been extremely successful and has taken companies from, in one case, they were in receivership, and within 4 years, she had them at a valuation over 4 billion. The woman is just a pro. And the nice thing that I guess I didn't anticipate, and I guess for those who are maybe not as far along as I am yet, something to keep in mind. I'm so excited to be able to spend more of my time focusing on the vision part and the relationships and the ethical parts, knowing that operationally she's going to make sure every I is dotted and every T is crossed. And I'm still the sole shareholder. So she still technically reports to me. But at the end of the day, I get to kind of hand off some of that responsibility. And it's been amazing. It's been absolutely amazing.
I just still am marveling. I mean, for all of you who are listening to this too, just the fact that Connie owns 100% of this organization at this point in time for this battery is just so shocking. You're just like such a stellar example for this, because this means that you're able to have the control to create the kind of impact that you want to have instead of just chasing the dollars. So really, really thrilled for that. I would like to go into breakout groups just so people can have a time to connect with each other around what you've learned here. So we're just going to go into groups of 4 for 10 minutes, and then we're going to come back here and just share to close. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. And thank you, Connie, for the inspiration. I know there's lots of questions. We're going to download the chat. But Nat, do you want to send us off?
Yeah, 12 minutes. How does that sound?
Sure.
Great.
Sure. Thanks.
See you all back here in a minute, in 12 minutes.
Thanks, Nat.
Hey, Nat.
Welcome back, everyone. Hey, Carly.
Hey, does Coralus have a write-up for Connie that I can use to make that nomination happen? Connie, we're talking about you again.
We'll reach out to Connie. Just ping us and we'll see what we can get. And I just, thanks very much, Carly, for mentioning that. I don't know if people saw in the chat, nominating Connie for an award. And I think this is something that we can really do in our community too. If you see people who you think would be great for different awards that are out there, please ping us. If we get a little group of people who are good at writing these things together, that would be amazing. Does anyone want to share from their group summaries how you're feeling, what you learned today, commonalities in your journey? Oh my godnesses, whatever. That was just like something else to witness. Come on off mute if you'd like.
100%. Oh no.
Yeah, thanks. Mahi, hi.
Hi, yeah. I think what I'm so taken aback by is finally meeting women who've talked about just I know it's a stereotype. I mean, we've heard it so much about just being stopped by this old system of this of white men that have just built this system and lived off it in a different time period. These dinosaurs we have to go against. But I think just immediately talking and hearing various women who've kind of fought through it, or various people, it's been quite shocking to me. Because I guess I didn't realize it. I'm not like, I've only been in the field like 10, 15 years, but I didn't realize how much it damaged me. I mean, I knew, but I just didn't know how to heal myself, and I still don't know. My background's mechanical engineering, and I'm still like, like what happened to me in the past 10 years of my life. So thank you for this.
Yeah, I think this is one of the things this year we really want to be sharing some more of these stories, and because like just what we are all collectively helping people to overcome, so that their vision can be instantiated in the world, so that we can have a better world with these ideas that are like, so many of our systems are just so screwed up in how they're designed. Just the way she talked about the AC and the DC and the loss, like it, and lots of people are walking around going, oh, that's fine. And so to be able to support those who are just like, no, that's not, it's amazing. So thank you, everyone. Anyone else want to share?
You know, Vicky, I'll jump in for a second since there's a gap. Got to fill it. Got to keep talking. Yeah. One of the things, though, I think is so important about the rethinking, and I'm quite sure we both agree on this. I'm making a bit of an assumption, but everybody assumes that when you're changing systems, that it's like everything about the old system is bad, and the people who are part of it are bad, and it's just this whole mass of us against them. Instead of being okay, well, we recognize as a problem. How do we fix the problems? How do we rethink the systems? And it's, so much, I hate that approach of that's the bad guy and we're the good guy, and vice versa. And I love how much more like, I've been super impressed, quite frankly, that, banks have started to get behind this group and say, you know what, you guys are showing us that what you said could be done can be done. And that's amazing. Like that you could actually make banks like, BMO, I'm pretty sure it's BMO.
Yeah.
stand up and go, you know what? You proved it. You proved it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
well, this is part of all of our work here is to actually have examples of doing things differently in another way so that more and more people will pay attention. And so, yeah, thank you. In my group, one person had shared that it makes them, they feel motivated as an activator to know that this is like the support that we're contributing is enabling stuff like this. So I just wonder if anyone else, the thumbs up kind of got that message today. Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks. It's one of the big things that I, sometimes we have so many stories and so many things going on that you can kind of lose sight. And this year we really want to center in on all of us being here. Just having this model out in the world enables this kind of impact. And so, Connie, we're so proud of you.
Thank you. And I don't know what you were suggesting nominating me for, but just the fact that you were thinking of nominating me for something, thank you.
That was Carly. Carly's got you on a list for something. So stand by because we're going to need some data.
Okay, I can do that.
That's what you can do with your newfound free time. Help tell the story so that we can get it out there.
No free time, but I will find time somehow in there.
Yeah.
I love Deb's Day's comment. So what do you need next? What's in the way? What can we help you with?
Is that to me?
Yeah.
Yes.
You know what? Part of it is how do I put this? A little bit of general advocacy to people to rethink our energy systems. Because one of the biggest problems we actually run into is, and I kind of alluded to this with you're the bad guy, we're the good guy kind of thing, is that utilities see us as the enemy because we don't approach it the way they typically approach it. And part of it has to do with governments and how we deal with utilities and this idea that they should be allowed to have monopolies. And because right now, and this is a terrible example, but a really important one, just before Christmas, I actually read an article about a 1.5 megawatt solar system that was put on the roof of Equaluit College, I believe it was. And it's been up for 18 months and they have not been able to turn it on because the utility just said, no, we're not going to. And there's legitimate reasons why utilities need to be aware and be involved in all of these things. But the fact that that can happen is an absolute crime, in my opinion, because you're talking about an area that is almost entirely reliant on diesel generators for power, one of the worst polluters there is going. So just having people like going, hey, why do we allow this? Should we not, in talking to companies and potential people who want to put in embedded generations like mines or golf courses, I don't care. But if it's somebody who can buy our product, awesome. And if it's somebody who has the potential to have a voice to say, why is this allowed? Because we can't reach globally, we will not reach the climate goals that we have set if we continue on this path of allowing utilities to say, no, we get to say no. And that's just that. And that's how it is approached right now. There's real legitimate technical things involved, but they're all solvable. If somebody tells you they're not solvable, it's nonsense in my opinion. And this is where that good guy, bad guy comes in, like, well, it's not our fault. We're just doing what we have to do. So part of it, I think, is just generally changing the conversation, which is something I think everybody can do. So
yeah.
I don't know if that answers.
Well, thank you for giving us a good example of how we can share that out. And we're going to share some clips from this on social, and hopefully you can help amplify some of these messages. Steph is pulling this together. And on that note, I just want to thank everyone for being here today. We have a couple of things coming up. So on March 6th, we're having a big announcement. Canada, US, and UK, who are the new ventures? What have we learned? We're seeing some cool patterns in who was selected this year. So we're going to share that. And amazing. So many of the ventures that are coming to us now are activators already that are coming through, have been referred in from the community. So we're going to storytell quite a bit of like how all of us have created the conditions for these different groups to be here. And we're really excited for that announcement. And we have a special surprise on that announcement too, which I won't say any more about. On our way to Australia, Nat's going to put in the chat. There's a few events coming up in Australia and New Zealand. And so we'll just share them in the chat. If you know people in those regions, we'll also be posting on social. Please feel free to amplify or tag folks. That would be great. And the next Rethinking call is going to be with Chenny, who is didn't get back on the title for this, but it's something like Dancing with Dark Matter to Create Momentum. Wow. So only at Coralus, these kinds of topics. And dark matter, which people probably know, 99% of the universe is dark matter, and we don't know what it is. And we think we know so much, right? So there are all these forces in play out there that can help us build momentum as we start to do things differently. And so Chenny is going to be exploring that, and I'm working with her on that presentation. And then after that, we're going to do kelp. Amazing kelp farmer from Australia who's really cool coming up after that. So we'll be doing one of these a month. And so please watch out for them. Nat, did I miss anything? That's it? Okay. And for those who signed up for the PEI retreats, oh my gosh, overwhelming number of people said yes. So we're like in the back trying to figure out how to add some more dates. So stay tuned. There's something in your inbox about that if you said that you were interested or want to be part of those. All right. Thank you very much for being here, everyone. Hope you have an amazing rest of your evening / morning, wherever you are in the world. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again in a month. Bye. Thanks, Connie. Mwah. Good luck with everything.
Thank you.
Fight the power.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. That was awesome.
Thank you. Amazing.
Thanks, everyone.